can't take it anymore. You understand? I'm not going to live in this bedroom the rest of my life. I'm not happy there. So you know what?
Flashing red and blue sliced through the morning haze. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, and suddenly everyone in that building knew something was very, very wrong. Jenny hadn't even finished her tea. One moment she's bracing herself for another day of stomach-knotting silence, and the next, the police are at her door looking for Sumit. No drama, no fake-outs. He didn't protest or cry. He just sat there, pale, empty, almost relieved to have his double life dragged into the light. You know that instinct, when time slows and your body senses danger before your mind catches up. Jenny's hands shook as they cuffed her husband, while nosy neighbors poked from cracked doors, and someone was already recording on their phone. TLC fans have obsessively followed every step of Sumit and Jenny's weird, awkward, against-the-odds romance, but nobody, and I mean nobody, expected to go from reality TV memes to actual criminal courtrooms. This wasn't some manufactured scandal cooked up by producers. This was the moment everything changed for Jenny. The cameras were off, the script had run out, and all that was left was humiliation. Not just the public kind, but that white-hot, behind-the-eyes shame of realizing someone you crossed oceans for might have been playing a different game the whole time. Months of little signs. The late-night laptop clicks, the sudden mood swings, the weird tension hissing between them. The money that quietly kept evaporating, the stories that kept getting shakier. All those things she had denied, ignored, made excuses for, they showed up together at her apartment door that morning, wearing badges. But what if this was only the beginning of Jenny's nightmare? What did Sumit do to push her to the breaking point, and how deep do his secrets really go? Is this the spectacular collapse everyone secretly saw coming, or is there something even uglier waiting just out of frame? No one who watched those two bicker on 90 Day Fiancé could have guessed it would end with a knock, handcuffs, and a $280,000 reckoning. And Jenny, she's about to face the fallout alone, in front of millions. What happens to a love story that becomes a crime scene? Which warning signs would you have spotted, and which ones would leave you reeling if the person you trusted most turned out to be someone you never knew at all? Hang tight, because the simple answer is about to get a lot messier as the truth drags both Jenny and Sumit further and further from that fairy tale beginning everyone thought they saw on TV. Let's step back for a second, before the sirens, before all eyes in the neighborhood suddenly knew Sumit's full legal name. Not too long ago, Jenny was packing up her condo in Palm Springs with wide-eyed optimism. She'd given up her quiet California retired life to move halfway across the world for a chance at love with a guy she met online, a guy nearly 3 decades younger. And Sumit was the classic charmer. All puppy eyes and promises, thirsty to prove that love didn't care about numbers, time zones, or mother-in-laws. They went from sliding into each other's DMs to starring in America's favorite guilty pleasure, grinning their way through airport arrivals and, will they, won't they cliffhangers. You know that part at the end of every rom-com where the couple triumphs over cultural differences, family doubts, and their own baggage? That's where Jenny thought her story was headed. Instead, she crash-landed in a tiny Indian flat with broken air conditioning and the subtle background music of Sumit's relatives gossiping about her being too old, too foreign, too different. The camera always cut to her hopeful face while his family sat stone-faced, barely hiding their horror at the idea that Sumit might pick love over tradition. Twitter roasted them, memes exploded, but in private, Jenny kept pushing through, anything to hang on to the dream. The honeymoon phase was beautiful, on TV at least. In real life, it crumbled fast. First came the endless family drama, with Sumit's parents dropping more ultimatums than your favorite Real Housewives reunion. Then the bills started piling up. Sumit lost his job, which he said wasn't a big deal. But between the side glances, the constant calls from his folks, and Jenny's dwindling savings, the air started changing. Suddenly, every rupee mattered. Jenny's social security check was being stretched for 2, and the glossy Insta-Perfect meals vanished, replaced by tense dinners and silent mornings. Things got weird. Sumit started staying up late, eyes locked on his laptop. He brushed off Jenny's questions with a quick, nothing, babe, just checking emails, while suspicious tabs blinked out in the background. Then he'd swing between manic cheerfulness and icy detachment, depending on the day, and depending on whether the doorbell was a package or someone looking to collect. Have you ever watched someone you love and felt like you don't recognize them anymore? Because that sense settled over Jenny like a cold, heavy blanket. It wasn't just the money. It was the look in his eyes when she dared to ask what was wrong, the careful way he checked their bank balances, the way her small gold necklace disappeared one week, chalked up to being misplaced in a move. Friends back home thought she was finally living the big love story, defeating the haters and proving the skeptics wrong. If only they knew her love wins. Instagram posts were hiding stacks of unpaid bills and nights spent lying awake, listening for clues in Sumit's midnight phone calls. Remember the time in every reality show when the music shifts and you start to realize someone is about to get blindsided? Jenny was living in that freeze frame. She started to wonder if the fairy tale ending was always a mirage, if the red flags she dodged for months weren't harmless quirks after all. The tension thickened with every unexplained withdrawal, every mysterious moment when Sumit ducked out for errands and returned shifty-eyed and silent. Just when she thought things couldn't get shakier, Jenny caught a late-night pop-up on Sumit's computer, something that didn't fit any excuse he'd given her. That moment burned a hole in her nerves, a signal that the worst part of the story wasn't behind them but charging straight toward her. If Jenny had known how much trouble was still on its way, maybe she would have dropped her suitcase and saved herself years ago. So now, with trust on life support and her life in a stranger's hands, Jenny's wondering if her wildest decision might also be her biggest regret. If you think you've seen tension before, you haven't seen anything yet. Things got tense fast. Jenny watched her bank account shrink almost overnight, stray rupees melting away with explanations that sounded less convincing every time. Every withdrawal became an argument, disguised as small talk, never fully answered. She kept finding odd holes in their budget, nothing jaw-dropping at first, just enough to make her second-guess herself. Was she overthinking it? Had she suddenly become forgetful? Or was Sumit just working overtime at building new stories that didn't make sense? Despite the obvious warning signs, Jenny kept marching forward, loyal to a fault. Her logic: love is about patience, right? She'd already abandoned her old life for this relationship, convinced herself that everyone else was just too judgmental, too narrow to understand the idea of cross-cultural, cross-generational love. Now, each passing week, loyalty turned into survival mode. She was defending Sumit to her American friends on FaceTime and to her own gut in the quiet moments after fights faded. At least on TV, you get a chance to hit pause before the disasters. Sumit, meanwhile, went from pleading for understanding with watery eyes to straight-up flipping the narrative any time she showed the tiniest skepticism. If Jenny questioned a missing bill payment or wondered out loud, somehow the focus would whip right back to her supposed lack of trust. Suddenly, she was the problem. "How can you even ask me that? Don't you remember everything I did to be with you?" He started throwing guilt trips faster than contestants on The Bachelor hand out roses. Jenny would back down, rattled, feeling like the villain for wanting basic honesty. If you're watching this and thinking, no person would put up with that, ask yourself, how many times have people in your own life chosen hope over truth? Jenny did. She wrapped every fear in another excuse, and the house of cards grew shakier. The Instagram fairy tale faded. Instead, Jenny found herself scrubbing dishes in a kitchen that buzzed with stress, smiling nervously in front of Sumit's family, still trying to play the part of good wife, while his parents' hostility seeped through every meal. The tension in that apartment was enough to make anyone break out in a sweat. And those in-laws. Reality TV gold. One side-eye from Sumit's mother could curdle milk. She'd drop barbed comments about Jenny's age or foreign habits, then act shocked when offense was taken. It was like living in an endless loop of those awkward married-at-first-sight dinner parties, except this one never ended and the camera crew wasn't picking up the pieces when the fighting got personal. Finding something to laugh at became Jenny's survival strategy. You'd have to, when your support system is made of people who think you're stealing their son from tradition. But underneath the tension, Jenny still clung to hope. Not because she loved being miserable, but because that's how you survive when a relationship becomes complicated enough to make every other couple's problems look tiny. When Sumit softened, she softened. He'd come in with an apology, or flower petals, or grand promises that next month's money would be different. Part of her always wanted to believe him. Ever felt trapped by her own optimism? Jenny did, until the excuses finally ran out. One rainy afternoon, a soggy envelope arrived, barely sealed, corner ripped. Jenny opened it expecting junk mail. Instead, she found a bank statement that made her heart drop. Pages and pages of charges she didn't recognize. Overdue notices. Lenders threatening action. For a second, she actually checked the name. Was this someone else's bill? But no, this financial disaster was spelled out in black and white, signed by Sumit Singh himself. That was her world turning upside down. And in that moment, all the doubts, all the warnings, all the sidelong glances from doubters around the world suddenly felt very, very true. Jenny stared at the proof, her hands shaking, wondering if there was any going back, or if she'd finally run out of last chances for her marriage. What she did next would not only decide her own fate, but become the center of the wildest plot twist 90-Day Fiancé fans have ever seen. The letter on Jenny's kitchen table was more than overdue. It was official. Legal stamps, court threats, the kind of envelope that means your next meal comes with a side of panic. Jenny opened it slowly, like any more sudden movement could make the numbers go even higher. They wanted almost $300,000, and they wanted it now. Jenny barely had $300 in her wallet. This wasn't a private storm anymore. It had a paper trail. Within days, the gossip was everywhere. Local neighbors stared extra long in the elevator. News in the building spread like wildfire, and before Jenny could even process the scale of the disaster, her phone lit up with WhatsApp messages, fake sympathies mixed with barely hidden curiosity. She tried blocking out the world behind closed curtains, but fans of the show are faster than any NDA or privacy request. Even her cousins back in America, people she hadn't spoken to in years, were forwarding links asking, "Is this you? Is it true?" Even reality TV can't prepare you for real reality crashing into your timeline. The internet wasted 0 seconds. Memes soared through Instagram, clips from past seasons got recycled, with Sumit's face photoshopped onto pictures of slot machines and Jenny's into soap opera heroines. I mean, at some point the entire plot crossed the line from tragic to bizarre. Jenny, blink twice if you need a GoFundMe. If only love could pay the bills. The roasting went viral. Odds are you saw at least one reel about it even if you never watched the show. There's no jury in the world harsher than anonymous commenters who know your bank balance before your best friend does. Jenny, years ago, would have buckled under this level of humiliation. She'd been through plenty already. Snide remarks about her age, the whispers about her reasons for marrying Sumit, watching her love story dissected by families and full-time couch critics. But now something snapped differently inside her. Instead of hiding, she started asking the right questions, not to strangers, but to herself. When trust finally ran out, what was left to protect? Facing Sumit in their tiny living room, Jenny was done staging scenes for the cameras. She was blunt. No more tears, no more half-accusations. All she wanted were straight answers, but Sumit couldn't even look her in the eye. Every time he tried another apology, his voice got smaller. There was no secret money, no plan, just another day of denying it could get worse. He blamed addiction. He blamed stress. He blamed bad luck. And every single time the excuses came full circle, landing back on Jenny. Why don't you trust me? Why aren't you supporting me? Didn't you say we were a team? That's the kind of emotional Houdini act that turns love from safe haven into a locked cage. You start to realize surviving isn't about saving someone else, but about making sure you don't drown with them. Jenny saw how her life got wrapped around Sumit's chaos. Her golden years had turned from late-night strolls with a hopeful heart into headlines and court orders. Every compliment he ever gave now felt like it came with terms and conditions. Every failed promise was logged, stored, and used as a weapon. Who thinks they'll end up in a story like this at 60? Social media kept pouring salt into the mess. Reddit threads dissected their finances with more intensity than a tax audit. Some viewers chimed in with support, others called her gullible, a walking ATM, or worse. It stung, but not as much as seeing her in-laws quietly glad the marriage was on life support. Even Sumit's mother managed to look both vindicated and disappointed at the same time, a talent only reality moms seem to have. Jenny would sit through tense calls with distant relatives, each trying to squeeze the latest gossip while digging for some moral high ground. Eventually, she stopped answering. All the promises about forever were now just background noise to what unfolded in the courtroom. Reporters snapped photos. Lawyers read numbers out loud that made Jenny squeeze her fists. The judge didn't have any patience for second chances. For the first time since she landed in India, Jenny felt seen, but not safe, on display, not in love. Trust and agency don't survive long in a relationship riddled with secrets. Jenny realized dignity meant more than sticking out a toxic situation just to prove a point or keep up appearances for fans. Sometimes leaving is the bravest thing you can do. Everyone asks, why didn't she see the warning signs? But living through this storm, as she watched every safety net unravel, Jenny came to accept she'd spent years fighting for an idea instead of her own peace. That's not failure. That's surviving a bad script by refusing to let someone else write your ending. Still, as she took the elevator home with the world's worst news following her up every floor, she wondered if there was even a piece of happiness left worth saving, or if love had been replaced for good by shame and regret. Waiting upstairs was the next chapter, but this page wasn't done turning yet. In the weeks after the trial, Jenny could barely breathe without feeling the pressure of 1,000 eyes. Some were real, some imagined, but all of them made her wonder if healing was possible after the world had watched her lowest point. Sumit was in prison, not a TV twist, but an actual, steel-door reality. His calls weren't full of apologies. They were laced with the expectation that Jenny would wait, forgive, help pay his debts, and somehow hit the reset button. But Jenny had stopped living in reruns. No more waiting for someone else to give her permission to move on. Divorce was a word she had never dreamed would apply to her fairy tale. Signing the papers felt like ripping bandages off wounds that never closed right, but there was relief between the pain. She wasn't running anymore. People expect tears and breakdowns, but the most dramatic part was the silence that followed, the hum in her apartment as she ate simple meals, the echo of her own thoughts with no one left to interrogate her, gaslight her, or demand more than she could give. A few of the old faces from her life in America reached out. Some brought judgment, others brought kindness, but Jenny stopped caring what people thought about her age, her choices, or her failed marriage. Once upon a time, she cared deeply. Now, she realized that audience opinions don't weigh anything against the freedom to enjoy a meal, take a walk, or choose who sits on the couch beside you. That freedom came with a cost. She'd spent years paying it in sacrifices that nobody wrote songs about. For a while, the days bled together. She kept her head down, budgeted out every dollar, and started therapy with a soft-spoken counselor who let her unravel years of secrets without ever pressing for theatrics. Healing was slow and mostly invisible. She joined a support group, a loosely connected tribe of women who'd weathered public scandal, heartbreak, and the weird aftermath of viral fame. They met in spare rooms above coffee shops and didn't judge the pain you brought with you. In those meetings, she found a new kind of power, not the adoration of millions, but the steady applause of people who refuse to surrender their dignity at any price. When Jenny talks about what it's like to start over in your 60s, she isn't looking for sympathy. She's looking for fellow survivors. Would you? Would you pack up and leave everything behind for love? Would you risk humiliation, heartbreak, and the glare of judgment if you still believed romance could change your life? Most claim they'd see the warning signs and bail before the damage, but you never know until you've fought for something and lost anyway. The first step toward life after Sumit was letting go of the scripts she'd clung to for years. She boxed up wedding photos, blocked toxic contacts, and poured her energy into rediscovering tiny pleasures, a new recipe, a morning coffee in the sun, conversations that didn't end in accusations. The shaky starts were hard. She missed the drama sometimes, the adrenaline that came from never knowing what each week would bring. But as routines replaced battles, peace crept in. Therapy taught her to name abuse without shame. Group support taught her to stand up for herself, even if it meant standing alone. In public, she kept her chin up. If a neighbor whispered at the market, she smiled and moved on. If a fan asked for a selfie or pressed for gossip, she sent them back to TLC reruns to chase their own version of events. Jenny stopped explaining herself, and that changed everything. You could see the difference. Lighter steps, sharper edges to her jokes, less apology, and more presence. The big reversal wasn't in the divorce or the court case, but in Jenny refusing to be anyone's sad ending. Pain taught her about boundaries. Loneliness taught her about strength. She knew she'd paid dearly for her choices, but what she gained in self-respect was worth more than any TLC paycheck could offer. So when a friend from her women's group introduced her to Zach, Jenny didn't rush in. There was no whirlwind, no grand declarations, no #second chances. This was different, a slow trust, an easy conversation, the sense of being heard instead of managed. They started as two people who could laugh about heartbreak without letting it define every new memory. Zach listened, really listened, never cutting her off or telling her to move on. When Jenny finally shared the story not as a punchline, but as part of her own journey, Zach didn't blink or run. He understood that courage isn't about avoiding scars, it's about showing up with them and daring someone else to see you as whole. For Jenny, that was the real freedom, being able to choose again, this time without fear, obligation, or guilt. She didn't need a rescue. She built her own rescue, step by unglamorous step, by telling the truth about what happened, letting people in, and betting on herself rather than the hope of changing someone else's bad habits. Getting to that place took every ounce of her backbone, and some days she still missed the wild hope that started it all. But peace is addictive. For the first time in years, Jenny saw the possibility of happiness wasn't gone. It had only changed its address. The next chapter might bring new risks, trust issues, even the shadows of old pain, but it also brought the chance to build something honest, even if it was quieter. Change, after all, never comes with guarantees. The past still followed her some days. But as Jenny poured tea for Zach and laughed over stories of misadventures and new beginnings, she finally understood what moving on can look like when you choose your own ending, for real this time. The question now, would she risk her heart again, or keep one foot out the door, waiting for another disaster? One thing certain, the story was far from over, and Jenny was finally behind the wheel. Dating after national disaster is way more awkward than any second date cringe. Jenny found this out the hard way. Her friends joked she held the world record for reality TV breakups, beating even the Bachelor contestants who get booted night one. But that didn't stop the world from offering opinions about her love life, her finances, her everything. What did stop was Jenny herself. No more letting the world's noise drown her own instincts. The early days with Zach were the total opposite of what she'd known. No red carpets, no camera crews, no lurking relatives ready to pounce with an offhand insult. Zach didn't care about her resume on American cable. He cared about whether she liked her coffee hot or iced, whether she wanted to take a walk or just sit in silence on the balcony at sunset. Instead of critiquing her meals, he'd laugh if her spaghetti noodles stuck together. That kind of softness was a shock after years of ducking verbal grenades. Their rhythm was gentle. Jenny's guard was high at first. She apologized too much, double-checked simple plans, and expected some old trap to spring. Zach never rushed her. He let her pace set the story. She told him her trust was scarred, not broken, a big difference. One night over chai, she cracked up retelling her first disastrous dinner with Sumit's family. Zach didn't pity or poke. He laughed with her, putting the drama in its place instead of making it her identity. Every relationship comes with baggage, but together, Jenny and Zach packed light, keeping only what mattered. She sometimes looked back, comparing moments, how real smiles now feel, how fights are smaller, how nothing has to be hidden or denied. She realized the wildest parts of her life didn't need erasing, only understanding. She'd always carried the weight of those mistakes, but forgiving herself was the one power she'd never tried fully until now. Pop culture likes to pretend people who crash and burn on TV are doomed to keep repeating it, but Jenny's story turned a sharp corner. Her new normal came with random reminders, strangers asking for selfies, flashbacks when she heard the TLC theme song in an auto shop, friends reliving the old drama just to see if she'd spill any tea. She gave them the short version. It was a mess, but it's mine. Then she changed the subject to her latest book, or Zach's terrible attempts at making Indian chai. Each season of her life had begged for applause or forgiveness from viewers she'd never meet. This time, she stopped performing. She started saying what she wanted, calling her own shots, refusing to be at anyone's mercy or become some online running joke. In quiet, she healed the anger. In laughter, she rebuilt pleasure. When anxiety flared up, like a suspicious phone call or unsolicited advice from people who thought she was still that same starstruck woman, she reminded herself that survival isn't linear.
Some days she stumbled. Some days she soared.
But Zach kept showing up, even on the days when the world's judgment came creeping back. Instead of running, they would let the tension pass, and Jenny would remind herself just how different this chapter was. It was calm on the surface, but the decision to trust again was an act of courage every single time. Life turned ordinary and extraordinary at once. Grocery trips weren't missions in stealth anymore. She didn't wonder if her wallet was safe, or if her plans were going to get hijacked by someone else's lies. Even small acts, hanging a new photo, planting a little herb garden on the balcony, felt like wins. She could feel herself rooting in, building again, no matter what some old headline or burned-out fan had to say in the comments. If you pay attention, you can see the through lines. Jenny's leap for love, her trouble spotting danger in its early stages, and her final refusal to let pain make her small or cautious for good. The show gave the world every ugly angle, but off-camera, that's where she won. She stopped living for everyone else's entertainment and started listening to the small voice that knew what real peace sounded like. Some days, she caught herself grieving the love she still wished had lasted. That was honest. But what mattered was never letting someone else's bad choices define her value or her future. Every breakup joke, every "is this your karma?" jab, she answered with a smile and the quiet confidence of someone who had faced the end of her dreams and still got up to try again. Of course, nothing is simple. Right as life felt balanced, Jenny's phone buzzed with a friend's message, one she knew was connected to that world she thought she'd closed behind her for good. Sumit's family, it seemed, had a reason to reach out. A birthday, an old debt from before the scandal, maybe even a new round of TV producers sniffing out another sequel. Would she answer or ignore them? Would she let someone from her past disturb the new life she'd worked so hard to build, or stay rooted in the calm she fought for? That choice wasn't clear. Some doors shut with locks, and others leave a tiny crack the past can slip through. Jenny looked at Zach, felt the comfort of ordinary love, and knew whatever decision she made, it would be hers alone. Because peace, once earned, is a story worth protecting. And as Jenny set her phone down and turned back to a quiet evening, the only question left was, if someone you left in your past pushes back into your new beginning, would you risk reopening old wounds to finally close the book, or is happiness only possible when you never look back? The next chapter was waiting, the ending unwritten, and for the first time in her life, Jenny was ready to choose it on her terms.